It's now 7:30 p.m. I'm going to call the City Council meeting for January 22nd to order. Mr. Hill, please call the roll.
Mr. Severance.
Here.
Mr. Mahan.
Here.
Mrs. Woods.
Here.
Mr. Ruckman.
Here.
Ms. Keener.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mrs. Seaval.
We are in session. Anyone want to excuse Mrs. Sewell? I did talk to her today, and the doctor has her restricted to home for the whole month of January.
I'll make that motion. Second.
Been moved and second, that Mrs. Sewell be excused. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. He is excused. The invocation this evening, I don't see Rick here, so will be given by Mel Severance. Please rise to the invocation, remain standing for the pledge.
Let us pray. Father, thank you for this time that we can be together to do business for this city. I pray that you will give each of us in the room wisdom and guidance. Thank you for your love. Thank you for blessing us, and give us a good evening. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Mel. I pledge allegiance to
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Council, in your packet was the minutes of the January 8th meeting. Are there any additions or corrections? Not, I'd ask for a motion for approval.
So moved. Second.
Been moved and second they be approved. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. They are approved. Mr. Hill, any petitions or communications?
There are none.
And liquor control licenses, I see none. Proclamations, I see none. We have one person wanting to speak on matters of city concern. That's Zach Green, our Knox County Public Health Commissioner, to give his update. Mr. Green.
Good evening, Council President. Thank you. Hope everyone starting off the new year on a great foot. Does anybody have any immediate questions? I give you guys these city statistics on a regular basis. Is there anything in particular that you guys would like to see in addition to? I know vital statistics is an ongoing question. I do want to bring your attention to just ongoing medical visits between dental, medical, and behavioral health. We are finalizing our remodel at 202 West Vine Street. We're looking to be operational on that site starting next week, assuming that we have final inspections that are out there, and it's supposed to occur Wednesday, Thursday this week. So assuming that all goes as planned, we're looking to move in and start seeing patients at our new site. So I'm looking forward to that. It is 9 treatment facility rooms, so we'll have nurse practitioners, medical docs, along with 2 mental health, substance abuse disorder counseling rooms, full immunization and full lab at that location.
So is the outside of the building changed or just the infrastructure inside?
Just the inside. Yep, we did a complete remodel inside.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing in the exterior. I mean, some signage, some lighting, but nothing in addition to. Yeah.
Okay.
So are you asking if there's something that we would want to see on
In
here?
addition to, or maybe even further clarification?
So I think that you mentioned Lyme disease last time, and that's something that we really want to raise public awareness of. I would like to see continued numbers on that moving forward. I know that that's a passion of yours, so.
Yeah, for sure. Since you brought that up, I can definitely add that for sure, and we can track it throughout the quarter. But as far as year end for 2023, we had 132 cases of Lyme disease. That was almost 100% increase from 22. We had 72 cases in 2022.
Any updates on COVID in the county?
Just overall, what I would call influenza-like illness at this point, ILL. Through wastewater treatment, we are seeing an ongoing rise in our influenza, COVID-19, RSV, norovirus right now in our community. I would say that we are reaching the peak of influenza season. As you probably recall, in 2022 into 2023, we really hit that peak the end of November into December. So as now that we are monitoring through wastewater treatment for influenza in itself, it'll really give us a better feel over a multi-year trend to see what our seasons look like now that COVID-19 is going to become part of that discussion. But I do want to make sure everyone's aware RSV and norovirus is extremely high right now, and it's going to continue to be so probably until the spring.
I have a question about the
Yes, sir.
WIC participants. That's average monthly enrollment. So does that mean that in the fourth quarter, our numbers are higher than it's been for the rest of the year?
That would be accurate.
Okay.
And that's, again, if that's something you guys want to see change, it's always confused me when I look at that because it's nothing else in those columns are averages. So when I look at them, like, that doesn't make any sense. You really have to do a deeper dive. The problem with that is the caseload does change on a frequent basis. So we definitely just trying to capture it in the best way possible on a monthly basis. So you guys have a clear picture, regardless of what quarter it is. We did see an increase as obviously opportunities from the COVID-19 pandemic as far as additional income coverage, et cetera. As those declined, our WIC participants continued to rise. We submitted our reaccreditation for National FAB, Public Health Accreditation Board. That's a 5-year accreditation. So we submitted that 2 weeks ago. We'll receive notice in 45 days if there's any additional information that's warranted before they come and conduct their on-site visit. That's a lot of work. So I'm proud of my team for being able to address those 10 domains in a timely manner. We start looking at those reviews about 13 to 15 months out to be able to submit in a timely manner. So it's a 5-year process. It's an ongoing living document, unfortunately. It's a lot of work, but it's imperative that we continue to keep up with national accredited standards. Just funding opportunities for us as Little Knox County, that does pave some opportunities, not just for Knox Public Health, but our stakeholders as well. Community Health Assessment, our CHA, it's underway. We have identified 26 stakeholders that will be doing individual interviews along with some focus groups, so I'll be more than willing to share as that takes shape. We'll be looking to begin our improvement plan once the CHA is erected. I would say probably this summer we'll start looking at our CHIP, Community Health Improvement Plan. And with that, I'll stop there. Does anybody have any additional questions for me?
What pool did you inspect in the fourth quarter? It was kind of cold, wasn't
That
it?
was my question.
What's that?
What pool did you inspect in the fourth quarter?
My guess would be it's a hotel,
Oh, okay.
if I was a betting man.
Just wondered. Well, thank you, Zach.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Council, we're ready for the legislative portion of the meeting. The agenda was sent to you in advance, and you have one change to the agenda.
I do. We need to remove Resolution 2024-13. It is a duplicate of Resolution 2024-12.
A13 is removed. Any other changes? Not, I assume that the agenda is approved by consensus, and we move now to resolutions for second reading. The first one is resolution number 2024-01. Mr. Hill.
Resolution 2024-01, a resolution adopting rules for the conduct of city council meetings for the 2024-2025 biennium.
Mrs. Keener.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the rules and take Resolution 2024-1 to its third and final reading.
Second?
And moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Severance.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval.
The rule is suspended. Mrs. Keener.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adopt Resolution 2024-1.
Second?
And moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mrs. Keener.
I think that we just pass this every year to have council know how to run a meeting. So I think this is a good one.
And how to dress.
How to dress.
Can't let that one go, can you?
Throwing it in there.
Well, it doesn't affect me, so.
Me either.
Any other discussion? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Severance.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Miller. Yes. Mrs. Seaval.
Resolution is adopted. The next resolution is resolution number 2024-02. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2024-02, a resolution authorizing the sale by internet auction during calendar year 2024 of city-owned personal property which is not needed for public use or which is obsolete or unfit for the use for which it was acquired, and declaring an emergency.
Mrs. Woods.
Thank you, sir. I move to suspend the rules requiring 3 separate readings and take Resolution 2024-02 to its third and final reading.
Second.
Been moved and second for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval.
The resolution, the rule is suspended. Mrs. Woods.
Move to adopt Resolution 2024-02.
Second.
Been moved and second for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mrs. Woods.
Tanner, you want to handle that one for me?
Council, this is just setting forth the standards by which we dispose of unnecessary or obsolete public property, city-owned property. We utilize GovDeals, which is an online auction system. Sorry, John. But Terry, I don't know if you wanted to add anything. Anyone else? Or we can.
The reason this legislation is here is that the revised code requires council to adopt the use of internet auctions annually. So we always put it on as one of the first pieces of legislation to allow that option of the various departments if they're looking to get rid of property that we don't need anymore. We've been very successful using GovDeals, so.
Any other discussion?
No, sir.
Mr. Hill.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval.
Resolution is adopted. Next resolution is resolution number 2024-03. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2024-03, a resolution of the City of Mount Vernon, Ohio, supporting the Ohio Commission for the United States Semiquincentennial America 250-OH.
Thanks for mispronouncing that, because I had to do that on the radio today, and that's not an easy word to say. Mrs. Woods.
Thank you. I move to suspend the rules requiring 3 separate readings and take Resolution 2024-03 to its third and final reading.
Second.
And moved and second for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval.
The roll is suspended. Mrs. Woods.
Move to adopt Resolution 2024-03.
Second.
And moved and second for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mrs. Woods.
I just wanted to do this so we could hear somebody pronounce it. So I understand there's a $1,000 cost to this, but there's also sort of a timeline of getting people appointed and getting things underway. So one of you want to?
Well, the cost is, there's, I think we can kind of decide what we want to put into that, and 1,000 is probably, it sort of harkens back to the bicentennial of Mount Vernon, that type of thing. But anyway, we want to put some kind of, start with some kind of a budget. As far as the, I've got the, on the website for America 250, you can see what the purpose and the mission and what it is. It's basically a big party in 2026 that culminates on July 4th, 2026. Of course, we will have the fireworks and the concert at Ariel Foundation Park. Things will be leading up to that, but it gives us the opportunity to celebrate along the way as well. Checking with the Ohio Humanities Council, who is running lead on this, like before, they would like to have 2 people appointed to as running lead, and Amber suggests she volunteered to be the representative for the city, and then Olivia Toth from the Convention and Visitors Bureau is really chomping at the bit to get things moving and start organizing, getting the committee organized to start the planning process. So we've got that ready to go.
Any other questions? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval.
Resolution is adopted. Next resolution is resolution number 2024-04. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2024-04, a resolution confirming the mayor's reappointment of Sibley Pollen to the Historical Review Commission for a one-year term and declaring an emergency.
Mrs. Woods.
Thank you. I move to suspend the rules requiring 3 separate readings and take Resolution 2024-04 to its third and final reading.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt.
The rule is suspended. Mrs. Woods.
Move to adopt Resolution 2024-04.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mrs. Woods.
So, Mr. Mayor, since this term starts in a couple days,
Sure. These are one-year appointments to the Historical Review Commission. So anyway, I don't know that we have anything on the books for January, or, for February, yeah, we might. Anyway, Sibley is obviously a real estate agent, as you may see it from Red One. She lives in the Historic District on North Gay Street. She's very well versed in flipping homes and restoring historic homes, and she's anxious to continue her service.
We appreciate her service. Any other discussion? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
yes.
Mr. Ruckman.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt.
Resolution is adopted. The final resolution for second reading is resolution number 2024-05. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2024-05, a resolution authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and enter into contract for the Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, Dan Emmett Water and Sewer Improvements, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Ruckman.
Yes, sir. I'd like to give this its second reading and request a 15-minute committee meeting at our next city council meeting.
This resolution receives its second reading. Now I move to resolutions for first reading. The first one is resolution number 2024-06. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2024-06, a resolution authorizing the Safety Service Director of the City of Mount Vernon to enter into an agreement to acquire, in whole or in part, a single parcel of property located within the City of Mount Vernon and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Severns.
Yes, I move to suspend the rule requiring 3 separate readings and take Resolution 2024-06 to its third and final reading.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt.
The rule is suspended. Mr. Severns.
Yes, I move to adopt Resolution 2024-06.
Seconded.
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mr. Severns.
I think we know what this is, so I don't know that we need to go into any details, or do we?
Nope.
Nope.
Mr. Hill.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt.
The resolution is adopted. Next resolution is resolution number 2024-07. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2024-07, a resolution allowing Paddle for Heroes to camp at Memorial Park on May 19, 2024, as part of the 2024 Veterans and First Responders Awareness Kayak Trip and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Miller.
I move to suspend the rule requiring 3 separate readings and take resolution number 2024-07 to its third and final reading.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to suspend the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt.
The rule is suspended. Mr. Miller.
I move to adopt resolution number 2024-07.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mr. Miller.
No, I think it's a great thing for the city to continue to allow, and I think it's a great program.
Any other discussion? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt.
Resolution is adopted. Next resolution is Resolution 2024-08. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2024-08, a resolution authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and enter into contract for Mansfield Avenue waterline and drainage improvements and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Severns.
Yes, I'd like to give this its first reading? Is this first? Yes, and then get a 15-minute committee meeting at the next meeting, please.
Resolution 2024-08 receives its first reading. Next resolution is Resolution number 2024-09. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2024-09, a resolution authorizing and directing the Safety Service Director of the City of Mount Vernon, Ohio, to acquire by any means authorized by RC 735.05 Motorola APX N37/800 Model 2 portable radios and related equipment, software, and services for the Mount Vernon Police Department and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Mahan.
Thank you, sir. I move to suspend the rules requiring 3 separate readings and take Resolution 2024-09 to its third and final reading.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mrs. Siebel.
The rule is suspended. Mr. Mahan.
Mr. Chairman, I move to adopt Resolution number 2024-09.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mr. Mahan.
Council, I believe we've heard about the radio. This purchase, the money has been appropriated, correct, in the interim? And
It will be.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Thank you for that explanation, but the money's been budgeted. Okay, thank you for that. And Chief, this is a regular equipment purchase, and I believe you said our current radios are 9 years old and are actually now discontinued.
Yes, our current portable radios are 9 years old. The model number has been discontinued, and there's going to be some connectivity issues next year in 2025 with the Marks radio system. And so we felt it prudent now to get a little bit ahead of it and get the new portables in. And next year we'll be bringing back to change the radios out in the cars. The ones that the guys carry on their belts take quite a bit more beating than the ones in the cars, and they're in a little worse shape. So.
And you can't just go down and purchase these tomorrow. There's going to be some lead time.
Yes, there's a 20-week lead time on these with the supply chain backup that we have. Mr. Scott put the money in the interim so we could get the process started because there was a significant price jump. We're buying these on state bid contract. That's why there's no contract bidding process. We're buying them on state bid process, and we expected January 1st the price to go up between 8 and 12%. So we leveraged that and got the bid we had from last year approved. But this is a significant purchase. It's just shy of $162,000. That's for 40 radios. That's 40 portable radios.
Questions, council?
Do we think in the future, we learned a month or two ago through the Department of Agriculture, maybe we'll be able to secure some funding for some of this kind of stuff?
That is a great possibility for our mobile radios.
Okay.
The Department of Agricultural stuff that they had, where they would grant us up to 35% of the purchase and then a very low interest loan on the remaining 65% of the purchase. Could be utilized for this to save us about 35% of the cost of this.
So who's responsible to get that kind of an application in? Is that something?
That would be my responsibility.
Okay.
I've already gotten the paperwork from them.
Great.
To start the process. We don't need to start it right now, but we could. I plan on budgeting for the second round of radios in next year's budget, just to spread it out, and not have such a big hit at one time. The next phase of this is probably going to be about $90,000 to $100,000 for the radios in the cars. These radios are expensive, but we buy good quality, and we want good quality because it's a lifeline for the officers. So.
Any other discussion? Mr.
Thank
Hill?
you, council.
Mr. Severns,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Sevel.
Resolution is adopted. Next resolution is resolution number 2024-10. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2024-10, a resolution establishing the City of Mount Vernon's membership in the Knox County Regional Planning Commission and appointing representatives and declaring an emergency.
Mrs. Keener.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the rules and take Resolution 2024-10 to its third and final reading.
Second?
Been moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Severns,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Sevel.
The roll is suspended. Mrs. Keener.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adopt Resolution 2024-10.
Second?
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mrs. Keener.
Mayor, would you like to speak a bit about this?
Certainly. Council, this is, we participate in the Knox County Regional Planning Commission. This is essentially the political entities in the county can join by membership and come together to discuss issues on land use. There's a land use committee. There is a social and economic improvement committee. There's a few other things that this group does. It is essentially makes recommendations to governing bodies. If you get the blessing of the Regional Planning Commission, it's okay. Yeah, we think this is a good idea, or we don't think this is a good idea. And so that's what you see as the regular and the alternate member. Amadra Curry was appointed a while back as one of the citizen members. Sibley Poland was also appointed but resigned, and so we're still looking for an alternate from my appointment, and that'll be coming later on.
Important committee. Any discussion?
Just to clarify, Rob, there is not a conflict for Jay or I to vote on this because neither of us received.
No, because you're representing council.
I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
You get no pecuniary interest from being on the
Yes.
committee.
Yeah.
Mr. Hill.
Mr. Severns,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Sevel.
Resolution is adopted. Next resolution is resolution number 2024-11. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2024-11, a resolution adopting Phase 2 of the City of Mount Vernon Strategic Plan as a statement of the city's values and guide for future legislative and administrative priorities.
Mrs. Woods.
Thank you. We'll give this its first reading, and then can we get a committee meeting at the next, is 15 minutes enough? 15.
Okay. This resolution receives its first reading. We now move to resolution number 2024-12. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2024-12, a resolution authorizing and directing the auditor of the City of Mount Vernon to pay bills from 2023 and declaring an emergency.
Mrs. Woods.
Thank you. I move to suspend the rules requiring 3 separate readings and take Resolution 2024-12 to its third and final reading.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Severns,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Sevel.
The roll is suspended. Mrs. Woods.
Move to adopt Resolution 2024-12.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mrs. Woods.
Gary's taken his position.
Thank you, Mrs. Wood and council members. We do have an old bill from 2023 that needs to be adopted. It was using 2024's appropriations to satisfy the expenditure that requires council's authorization to do so. Thank you, Mrs. Woods.
And then can we also get in Section 2 where it says this ordinance, can that be changed to this resolution?
Yes, we'll pin that.
Any other discussion? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Severns,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mrs. Sevel.
Resolution is adopted. And we deleted Resolution 2024-13, so now we'll move to Resolution 2024-14. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2024-14, a resolution authorizing and directing the auditor of the City of Mount Vernon to pay bills pursuant to Section 5705.41D, then and now certification.
Mrs. Woods.
Thank you. I move to suspend the rules requiring 3 separate readings and take Resolution 2024-14 to its third and final reading.
Second.
And moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mrs. Sevel.
The roll is suspended. Mrs. Woods.
Move to adopt Resolution 2024-14.
Second.
And moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mrs. Woods.
Gary.
Oh, thank you, Mrs. Woods and council. This item comes before you on regards to an expenditure of Aaron Oakley doing maintenance and repair in our PBL department. And this obviously was, again, not timely done with their purchase orders. We will continue with the department and get them abreast. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mrs. Sevel.
Resolution is adopted, and that concludes the resolutions. We now move on to ordinances. We have several ordinances for first reading. The first one is ordinance number 2024-01. Mr. Hill.
Ordinance number 2024-01, an ordinance to accept the vacation of an undeveloped platted alley in the City of Mount Vernon, Knox County, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Mrs. Keener.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will give this its first reading, and we need to have a public meeting, but do we know?
We'll send information around about how we're gonna, what we need to schedule and what
Okay.
we need to do on that.
All right, thank you.
This ordinance receives its first reading. Next ordinance is ordinance number 2024-02. Mr. Hill.
Ordinance number 2024-02, an ordinance to accept the vacation of an undeveloped alley in the City of Mount Vernon, Knox County, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Mrs. Keener.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will also give this ordinance its first reading, and again, we'll have a meeting coming.
All right. This ordinance receives its first reading. Next ordinance is ordinance number 2024-03. Mr. Hill.
Ordinance number 2024-03, an ordinance fixing the compensation and benefits of certain employees of the Mount Vernon Municipal Court effective January 1, 2024, and declaring an emergency.
Mrs. Woods.
Thank you. We'll give its first reading, please.
This ordinance receives its first reading. Next ordinance is ordinance number 2024-04. Mr. Hill.
Ordinance number 2024-04, an ordinance fixing the compensation and benefits of certain employees of the Mount Vernon Municipal Court effective January 1, 2024, and declaring an emergency.
Mrs. Woods.
Thank you. We'll give ordinance 2024-04 its first reading.
This ordinance also receives its first reading. We now move to ordinance number 2024-05. Mr. Hill.
Ordinance number 2024-05, an ordinance fixing the compensation and benefits of certain employees of the Mount Vernon Municipal Court effective January 1, 2024, and declaring an emergency.
Mrs. Woods.
We'll give this ordinance its first reading.
This ordinance also receives its first reading. We now move to ordinance number 2024-06. Mr. Hill.
Ordinance number 2024-06, an ordinance fixing the compensation and benefits of certain employees of the Mount Vernon Municipal Court effective January 1, 2024, and declaring an emergency.
Mrs. Woods.
Thank you. We'll give this its first reading, and then I'd like to ask for a committee meeting at the next meeting. 15 minutes enough?
Yeah,
Let's do 15 minutes, and we'll get,
if need be, you can hold it over and
Okay.
have another committee meeting at the
Okay.
following meeting. There's no
and we'll get
rush.
some additional information. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the legislative portion of the meeting. We now move to remarks of administration. Mayor Starr.
Thank you, Mr. President and Council. I just wanted to thank everyone for your participation, your thoughtfulness, and also the preparation in working with the administration, the department heads, and Mr. Scott in preparation for the first of our budget appropriations meeting. this moved along differently than we have done before, and hopefully the new format will pay off, no pun intended, but will pay off with a really strong budget design for us. So thank you all for your hard work.
Thank you. Mr. Sayers.
Cheers. Just want to thank everybody again for all the work that we did on Saturday and to acknowledge the progress that the utilities department's making. We have a AD of the water plant now. We have an interview scheduled for our AD of the wastewater plant and for a chief operator at the water plant. So we are getting that good and staffed up, and I think that comes to the great relief of our director of utilities, but definitely a good thing for the community. So thank you again.
Mr. Scott.
Nothing further, Mr. President.
Mr. Stoller. Mr. Braun.
I have nothing this evening, thank you.
Mr. Severance.
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Mr. Miller. Nothing, sir. Mrs. Woods.
I just want to thank everybody for the conversation and work on Saturday also, and we'll do it again. Thank you.
Just so the public knows, we are going to have a meeting on February 3rd at 9 o'clock, I believe.
9:30.
9:30.
9:30? 9:30. You have that, Mr. Hill?
Yep.
I was wrong with it.
At,
The B&O.
What's that?
The
At the B&O
Depot.
railway station.
yes.
Mrs. Keener.
Depot. I was wondering if we could get an update on where the pool process is. I know that there was transition with council members, so I just wanted to mention that. And also, I'm really sorry about the jump in influenza. That's just my children. And that is all.
Mr. Mahan.
Nothing this evening, sir.
Mr. Ruckman.
Nothing this evening, sir.
That concludes the comments from council and administration. I'd like to thank the media for being here this evening. We did have a great meeting on Saturday, beginning of a meeting. We still have more to discuss. Just so the public knows, that's a substantial amount of money we're talking about. And council takes that very seriously. And the general fund is $13.7 million, and the all funds is $55.7 million. So that's a significant amount of money that we are working with, and we appreciate council, all the work they put into that. That being said, I call for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
And moving to second, we adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We are adjourned.
Hey, Tammy.
Nobody said anything. Is there